I'm VJ Hamilton and welcome to the Autoimmune Reset, the place for you to learn how to thrive with autoimmune disease and feel empowered to take steps to transform your health to feel better than ever. You can start making changes today to improve your health. So with every episode, my mission is to share with you simple ways to up-level your diet and lifestyle with key learnings from my own journey reversing autoimmune disease and inspirational stories from those who have reset their autoimmune symptoms and are now thriving in life. I suffered from autoimmune disease for over 25 years and now I live symptom-free, and I wish the same for you as well. So thank you for being here and sharing this time with me. Now let's get started. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Autoimmune Reset podcast. I'm your host, VJ Hamilton. I'm a nutritionist, scientist, and expert in autoimmune disease. And today I want to talk to you about 3 viruses that the research has shown may trigger autoimmune disease. And I'm going to be focusing on 3 autoimmune diseases in particular today, and that is type 1 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and lupus. But even if you don't have one of these particular autoimmune conditions, you will find this episode useful because it's going to talk about how a virus can trigger an autoimmune condition. And there is research around the mechanism behind how this happens. But I also think it is worth bearing in mind that even if a virus has triggered an autoimmune condition, there are probably many other contributing factors. So by working on your health, making your body more resilient to viruses is going to help you in the long run, because we all come into contact with lots of different viruses in our lives and not all of us get autoimmune disease. So we know there is more to the picture than that, but it is useful to understand this aspect of it. And I'm also going to be talking about long COVID as well, and how the SARS-CoV-2 virus can trigger the reactivation of some viruses in the body that are linked to autoimmunity. So let's start by talking about a particular virus that has been linked to type 1 diabetes, and that's the Coxsackievirus. And what they have found is that when children are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, because we know that type 1 diabetes is more associated with diabetes that is diagnosed at a young age, and it is an autoimmune disease as well. And in type 1 diabetes, the immune system attacks and destroys the insulin-producing cells in the pancreas. And that's extremely important in regulating blood sugar, and it can be an extremely serious illness if it isn't detected quickly enough. But certain viral infections may actually trigger that autoimmune response. And one virus that has been studied is this Coxsackievirus. And it's a pretty common virus, and it will normally just cause a mild illness like hand, foot and mouth disease in kids. But a recent study that has been published in Nature Medicine in 2023 found that children who had been infected by this Coxsackievirus were more likely to develop type 1 diabetes. So I am sure that there is more to this picture, as I mentioned, and it's certainly not something to be worried about. But it is interesting that this particular virus may trigger an autoimmune response in those children who are more susceptible to autoimmune disease. There are many other factors probably at play here as well, such as nutrient deficiencies and gut health and environment that need to be considered. But the research did look at the link between this virus and this autoimmune response to those insulin-producing cells in the pancreas. And the issue with this virus is that it can infect the pancreas, and that becomes an issue because if you are genetically predisposed, then if the virus has infected the pancreas, then what does the immune system do when you have a virus? It starts to attack. But as a result of that attack, it is also going to start attacking the insulin-producing cells. There is a mechanism called molecular mimicry, which I have spoken about before on the podcast, but this is where the virus looks similar to human tissue, and because of that, and it will have sequencing on it like ABC, and because the virus and the self-tissue look similar, the immune system attacks both. So if the immune system is doing what it should be doing, it is trying to protect you, but unfortunately it is attacking the wrong enemy. It's not attacking the virus anymore, it is attacking part of the pancreas. So it's worth considering this, especially if you have developed type 1 diabetes after a virus, or your child has developed type 1 diabetes after having a virus, because you can take a therapeutic approach to be able to eliminate these viruses from the body, and that is going to help bring down that autoimmune response as well. And that's why it's important with anything in autoimmune disease to really find the root cause, because then you know what you need to clear out the body. Because the first step in any autoimmune condition is to remove the trigger. You want to remove what's causing the autoimmune response, and then you work on these other contributing factors, which might be something like stress or eating a poor diet or having issues in the gut. But you need to really remove that trigger first as a priority. The other virus that has been studied, and it's been studied in depth in a lot of different autoimmune conditions, but I'm going to talk about Epstein-Barr virus, which causes glandular fever, and its relationship with rheumatoid arthritis. Now, rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune condition as well. It's an autoimmune mechanism that causes the arthritis, and for anybody that's got rheumatoid arthritis, you'll know that it can cause a lot of painful inflammation, swelling, and it does eventually damage the joints. And often when people have rheumatoid arthritis, they might notice this pain and swelling to begin with, and then the joints can become slightly disformed as well. But they have found that the Epstein-Barr virus may also cause this autoimmune response that is responsible for those symptoms in rheumatoid arthritis. And the thing about viruses is that when you get them, you have an immune reaction to them, and that is completely natural and that is helpful. So you might get a fever, or you might get a cold, or your body is trying to get rid of this virus, and those symptoms that you experience when you're not feeling well is actually a good thing. And the more intense, to a certain level obviously, but the more intense that response, the better your body is going to be at eradicating that virus. So when you're sweating, when you've got a fever, when you've got a cold, your body is just eliminating that virus, and that is extremely helpful. And I'm saying this because I know when I had many of my autoimmune symptoms and chronic fatigue syndrome, my immune system was so suppressed and I would never get ill. But in a sense, I was always ill because I just had this low-grade systemic inflammation and I would feel awful all the time, but I never actually got ill. So I never really had a day off work for an extremely long time. And that is because I never had these intense illnesses because my immune system just wasn't working. And now when I get ill, I get a fever, and it's so unusual to me because I never got fevers. And some people, when they first start developing an autoimmune condition, will be more in that inflamed state, so that acute inflammation, that intense inflammation. But I was way past that when I was in my 20s and I was working because I'd had it for so long, and that's when your immune system becomes suppressed. So I often see is somebody will have a very intense episode of inflammation, which could last years, to be honest, and then they become more immune suppressed. And what that means is that if you get infected by something like Epstein-Barr virus, then it's going to lay dormant in your body because you haven't killed it off. And that's why when I finally saw an endocrinologist and they tested the viruses in my body, or they tested the antibodies to those viruses in my body, they found that I had a very high amount. And that's probably because I just wasn't fighting them off. And with Epstein-Barr virus, it likes to hang out in some immune cells called B cells, which are responsible for producing antibodies. And for those that are genetically predisposed to rheumatoid arthritis, for example, if you have family members who have rheumatoid arthritis, then Epstein-Barr virus can reactivate, and it almost confuses the immune system. So the immune system then starts attacking the joints, and that's why you end up with the swelling, with the pain. That's inflammation. You get that when you get injured. But when it is your immune system that is causing the damage, because it again is trying to be helpful, because this virus has been reactivated, that can cause the symptoms that you experience. And that's why when I was improving my own health and going through various protocols, one of the protocols that made the most difference to me was when I did an antiviral protocol. And it's a protocol that I will use with my clients who have long COVID or they have post-viral chronic fatigue syndrome. And that's when they can see the most difference. And I worked with a client recently, and she followed the antiviral protocol for a couple of months. And to be honest, she didn't see her symptoms improve that quickly. But after about the third month, she was like completely transformed, and she had completely got her health back. And it was like the body had been able to eradicate the virus. And sometimes when you are removing these viruses from the body, because they're hiding in your cells, so they have to be released from the cell and they're released into the bloodstream, then you are killing them off and they're being detoxed and eliminated from the body. That can take some time, so you might not see the effects of that for a couple of months, but once you have got rid of those viruses, your immune system can start functioning again. Your digestive system is switched on again. Suddenly you start reaping the benefits of the nutrients you're eating and all the good work you're doing from a lifestyle and movement perspective. And that's what I see with clients who follow an antiviral protocol. It may take a while to see the effect of it, but when they come out the other side, they really start improving their health and accelerating their health improvements, because the viruses have been taken out of the body, and this immune reaction or this autoimmune reaction that is happening suddenly stops, and they can start enjoying the benefits of what they have been doing for their health. Because a lot of the time people are coming to me who are eating a good diet, they're doing their meditations, they're making sure that they are going for walks. I mean, not all the time, but a lot of the time I'm having clients coming to me and they have tried almost everything. And that's how testing can help as well. And I do several different viral panels that I will run. And there is some specific viral panels for Epstein-Barr virus, and you can get them done through your GP or your endocrinologist as well, which just gives you a really good insight into whether their viral load is high and whether an antiviral protocol will help, and whether this is the trigger for them. And as I said, the main thing when it comes to an autoimmune condition is to remove that trigger first. But when it comes to Epstein-Barr virus and rheumatoid arthritis, there was a recent study published, and they found that those with rheumatoid arthritis had a higher level of antibodies against Epstein-Barr virus compared to healthy people. And that was certainly the case for me. I was never diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, but one of the worst symptoms I had was the joint pain that I experienced and the swelling. And I actually had a lot of ganglions as well. So I had some deformity, which luckily completely healed. It's amazing, because these are really hard lumps. They felt almost like bone, but they obviously weren't. And, you know, my wrists are just completely normal now, which is unbelievable after having wrists that were so weak for such a long period of time. So again, something to think about if you have rheumatoid arthritis. Now, before we get on to talk about long COVID, and I'm going to leave the last virus to the end, but before we do that, I just wanted to let you know that I am about to start running my new program, the Inflammation Reset, which I'd love you to be part of. It is for anyone who is struggling with unexplained symptoms, chronic fatigue, or autoimmune flare-ups. And what I would like you to get out of this 10-step program, and it comes with group coaching and it comes with meal plans. So you have everything in one place and you get access to an exclusive community, and we will be meeting every week as part of the live group coaching. What I want you to get out of it is to understand what your trigger is and what your contributing factors is and what is at the root cause of your condition and what you need to do to work on it. I can help you and guide you through that process so that you come out of that 10-week program and you've worked on it and you are feeling so much better. And it's called the Inflammation Reset because my intention is to help you reduce inflammation in your body, because inflammation is at the heart of these conditions. When I was thinking about what program is really going to help my clients and going to help you, it is reducing inflammation, because you can still have autoantibodies, and if you're not inflamed, they are unlikely to cause symptoms. And yes, the ideal is to reduce those as well, but once you bring down your inflammation and you feel better, there is so much more value that you're going to get out of all the great work that you are doing. So I'm going to put the link to that in the show notes. It starts on Monday, the 23rd of September. You have until the 21st of September to join. I would love you to be part of it. And, there will be opportunity to ask me any questions that you have about the program. So feel free to email me if you have any questions. And yeah, I'll look forward to seeing you over there, I hope. But let's talk about the link between Epstein-Barr virus and COVID, because COVID can reactivate Epstein-Barr virus. And somebody who is a close family member had COVID and they had the symptoms. They had basically had the same symptoms as when they had glandular fever or mono, which is what Epstein-Barr virus causes. So they were really, really ill, because if you have had glandular fever, you will know how ill you can be with that. And luckily I have never had it. And actually when I got tested the second time for EBV, I didn't have it. And I spoke to a professor who he's a professor studying multiple sclerosis. He could not believe that I had never had Epstein-Barr virus. And actually, I have been around people with it. So I don't know if it was after doing this antiviral protocol, I had just completely eradicated it, or the test result was wrong. But most people have come into contact with it. But if you have experienced glandular fever before, then COVID can actually, what they've shown in the research, can reactivate it. And I have seen that in practice as well. Because you can imagine when you have a virus that is as complex and as disrupting as COVID, it puts a lot of pressure on your immune system. So the other viruses that were laying dormant in your immune system was probably keeping them in check as best as it could. Then you get COVID. The Epstein-Barr virus then becomes reactivated and you can go into a massive flare. As I said, you can experience symptoms like glandular fever. And some of the symptoms to look out for if Epstein-Barr virus has been reactivated are things like fatigue, muscle and joint pain, brain fog, a sore throat, swollen lymph nodes. These are symptoms that we associate with COVID anyway, but I'm not talking about the symptoms when you have COVID. These are symptoms that you can experience afterwards. And they're thinking now that long COVID is associated with the fact that these viruses become reactivated. And similar to me, when I had chronic fatigue syndrome, it was diagnosed as post-viral chronic fatigue syndrome, because it was the effect of viruses in my body that was causing the fatigue and causing the issues at the cellular level, which was completely depleting my energy. There is a lot of growing evidence now that this reactivated Epstein-Barr virus may be involved in some cases of long COVID. And some researchers have proposed that people with long-lasting symptoms of post-COVID have this reactivation as Epstein-Barr virus as a contributing factor. So how does that help you? Well, if you have long COVID, then it might be worth looking into whether you have a high viral load, and in particular, whether you have Epstein-Barr virus. And because there has been a lot of research around this, there are now panels that you can get, this viral trio panel, which is something that I offer to my clients. And feel free to message me if you want to find out more about that. But these viral panels can give you a good indication of whether your Epstein-Barr virus has been reactivated and if that is contributing to your long COVID symptoms. So it's just something to bear in mind, especially if you have experienced chronic fatigue syndrome after COVID, and it is certainly an area I would be looking into. Lastly, let's talk about Parvovirus B19 and systemic lupus. So as you may know, systemic lupus erythematosus is a complex autoimmune condition that can affect multiple organs. It can be quite hard to diagnose because the symptoms are so systemic, but it can affect anything from your skin to your kidneys. And actually, if you are ending up with symptoms that are quite sporadic, then something like SLE might be considered. And you might know Parvovirus as the virus that causes fifth disease in kids, which is usually a mild rash illness. But there is growing evidence that this Parvovirus could play a role in triggering lupus in those who are genetically susceptible. So let's talk about how it works. Well, Parvovirus can infect red blood cells, and you know I'm obsessed with red blood cells and the impact of those in the body, because when there's something going on with our red blood cells, and our red blood cells are the cells in the body that deliver oxygen, which is how we produce energy, there is going to be an issue. And when this Parvovirus is in the red blood cells, it triggers the immune system to produce antibodies. But these antibodies don't just target the virus. In some cases, they can start to attack the body's own tissue as well. And that can lead to chronic inflammation and tissue damage that we can see in lupus. And actually, a study from 2020 found that those with lupus had a higher rate of previous infection with Parvovirus than people without lupus. And what's more, the virus seems to trigger the production of autoantibodies, and we know they're a hallmark in autoimmune diseases like lupus. Now, what's particularly fascinating about this is that we're seeing similar viral mechanisms pop up in multiple autoimmune diseases. We've talked about 3 of them today, but I could talk about probably every autoimmune disease having a viral component, because some of the underlying mechanisms are similar. And what I find fascinating about this is that we always see autoimmune disease as a condition where our body is attacking self-tissue and going against us, but it is probably as much of a condition that is triggered by pathogens, so viruses, bacteria and parasites, as much as anything else. It just affects us in a more indirect way. And I felt passionately about this actually since I did my dissertation on a similar subject to this for vasculitis in 2004, because I just think we need to start seeing autoimmune diseases in a slightly different light. It isn't our body attacking ourselves. There is something going on that is causing the immune system to become dysfunctional. And yes, there is a part to play in reducing that, that inflammation that we get when we first experience an autoimmune disease and getting the immune cells back into balance. But we really need to find out what is triggering that and dealing with that. Now, as I mentioned, there is a panel that I use in my clinic called the Viral Trio Panel, and it is testing for viruses that are specifically linked to chronic fatigue syndrome and this reactivation that I've mentioned. And it will look at Epstein-Barr virus, but it doesn't just look at the virus itself. It's looking for a couple of different antibodies in the blood, because there are various different antibodies created which have a different immune reaction, and the panel will look at the different antibodies, and this gives you a good indication of whether it's just a antibody that is showing that you've been exposed to it in the past, whether it's been reactivated, and really what your immune system is doing at that moment in time. Because from that, you can then know whether you need to follow, say, an antiviral protocol or do something about it in that way, or it might be something else that is causing the autoimmune disease. Now, there are various ways that you can approach an antiviral protocol. As I mentioned, I followed one myself, and I was taking things like L-lysine, which is antiviral in nature. Arginine and lysine balance each other out, and when we have a high amount of arginine, that can feed viruses. So by taking lysine, that can help. It can help to prevent viruses from replicating. So that's really helpful. And it's certainly something that I took, and it's great for hair growth as well. So it was a win-win for me when I was taking lysine. But be cautious, because if you are thinking about taking any of these supplements, please work with a health practitioner, because there are contraindications. And also, if you take a supplement for too long, you can have a build-up of something like L-lysine, which is an amino acid. And when that builds up into high amounts in the blood, then it can cause imbalances. Like I said, it's balanced with arginine. And that can cause other issues, and it can affect things like cholesterol. So it's just always worth bearing in mind. Don't just take these supplements that I'm mentioning. I'm just telling you what I did. I also took humic acid, which is a natural compound found in soil. And it also has strong antiviral and immune modulating properties. And I really found a difference with this. And it's even to the point that when people will take humic acid, they may experience symptoms again. For example, if you are prone to cold sores, that is virus, and you can take humic acid and you may experience a cold sore as well while your body is eliminating it, and while you're going through a protocol, which is why when I work with clients, I work with them over a 3-month period, and I make sure that they have full support during that protocol, because it's certainly not something that I would suggest doing on your own. And lastly, there is Saccharomyces boulardii, which is a probiotic yeast, and it is known for its ability to harmonize the gut bacteria, but it also helps to manage viruses and that viral reaction that can happen in the body. So it's those 3 things combined really helped me. There were some other antiviral supporting supplements as well that I took, and there were supplements like vitamin C and zinc, which I took to really help support my immune system. There are also other supplements that you can consider as, that have an antiviral effect in the body, like monolaurin and olive leaf extract. But again, these can have almost side effects, because they're in there to have an effect, and anything that has an effect often has side effects, and that's why you need to do it in the best way you can and really manage that process. So today I've spoken about 3 viruses that can trigger an autoimmune response, and the link between COVID and reactivating Epstein-Barr virus. There is so much that I could talk about when it comes to viruses and autoimmune disease. So if you have any questions about this, then feel free to pop over to my Instagram account, which is at the Autoimmunity Nutritionist. And you can also join my free group, the Autoimmune Forum. I share lots of information over there, and I love to hear from you. So if you have any questions, you can ask them over there as well. And if you would like to join my new program, the Inflammation Reset, well, we'll be talking about this particular issue and lots of other triggers of autoimmune disease in more detail, then I will put the link to that in the show notes. I would love you to be part of it. And if you have any questions about the program, then again, feel free to reach out. If not, have a fantastic rest of your week, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Thank you very much for joining me today on the Autoimmune Reset. I really hope you enjoyed the discussion, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode. And if you liked it, I would hugely appreciate a review on iTunes, as it helps me understand what you like about the podcast and to help share the information with more people. I'm excited to speak to you next time, and remember, you have the power to take the reins on your health. So keep the faith and celebrate the small wins. Until next time.